I create anywhere and everywhere. Like if I'm at a restaurant and something pop into my head, I'm writing on the napkin.
Really?
I've been in Chuck E. Cheese with my 2-year-old son, just games blaring around me with my laptop, like, just banging it out. I feel like you as a professional author, you don't have the luxury to set the scene. You might not always be inspired. The environment might not always be perfect. It might, you might not always have your candle and your wine and the mood set to write, but you still have to write. Discipline accomplished those 60 books. It wasn't really a mood. I'll write anywhere.
Welcome to The Dash. You know The Dash is that tiny line between your life start date and end date. It's your story, the chapters in your book, your journey. Get ready for real conversations with real people telling real stories about the realities of failure, setbacks, and success. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Let's go. We're rolling. Let's go. The Dash in 3, 2, 1.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Dash Podcast. Ooh, what I tell y'all, I've been waiting for this interview. But before I introduce my next guest, I just want to first thank you guys so much for always tuning in. Make sure if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe. Share this with a friend. And I got to give a shout out to some very special people real fast. If you know, you know. Shouts out to the Ash Army. Because if you're in the Ash Army, you're going to love my guest today because this woman has consumed my life for the last 2 or 3 weeks. She is an author. I got to go down all your titles.
Oh,
She's
God.
actually a New York Times best-selling author, a literary agent, a television writer, Writers Guild of America. She is a mom. She's a founding partner of Bougie Hippie. Miss Ashley Antoinette. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh. I have had a love-hate relationship with her for the last few weeks. So I have to be honest. I'm not an avid reader. I'm not a reader at all.
Okay.
So we have a mutual friend, Latrice, and she said, girl, you gotta check out her books. I'm like, she don't understand.
You don't have time to read.
Yeah, I don't have time, and I never could keep up with characters, and nothing has ever, kept me engaged. She said, download Multiple Flames. So I did the audio book.
She started you right.
Oh my gosh, you guys. Not only am I in love with one of the characters, like literally my heart burns for this man.
Ash
Epic.
Army might fight you about that.
Like that audio book, I cannot wait to listen to the other ones. But forget all that. We're going to talk about all the books in just a second.
Okay.
We got to go back because I always say in order for people to really understand the hustle of you being this spectacular author, I want us to go back to how we even got to this place.
Ooh, okay.
So, how does a Black woman say, I am going to be a writer?
So this is a long story, and there's so many different layers to the story. My husband is also a writer.
Yes.
We started this journey together over 20 years ago in Flint, Michigan. We're from Flint. We're from the bottom, came up with very little. And I met him when he was running from the police.
Okay, now wait. See,
Yes.
this no wonder her books are so good.
So I write street fiction, and it's the motivation for the writings came from growing up in a city where all of these things happened every day. Like a lot of the characters I know or I've seen or it's just very personal experiences.
And I love how you put that because I'm street fiction. That is the perfect depiction of the book.
Yeah. And a lot of people run from that title because it's gritty. It's like, it's not romantic. It's not like, no, I write gritty street fiction. And I'm proud of that because I'm from the streets. I met my husband when he was running from the police at 15 years old. He was doing his thing, hustling on the corners, and he got hemmed up. And I was looking outside my window. I heard somebody hop my fence, and he threw his package in my bushes.
And you don't know him at this time?
I didn't know him. I knew of him. Flint is super small. So I knew of him. He was like one of the popular guys around the city. He was very good at football. So I knew who he was. But I didn't know him. We had never spoken, had never crossed paths. But I got his package out the bushes and hid it in my mama's basement. So, I see the police patting him down, roughing him up, but they had to let him go because they couldn't find anything. And a couple days later, I called a mutual friend of ours and I was like, have your boy call me. And so he called and I was like, I saw what went down. I got your package. He hung up on me. Yes.
He thought you were the feds
Yes,
or something.
he hung up the phone.
This sounds like a book. This doesn't even sound
Didn't
real.
even
Oh my gosh.
respond. He hung up the phone. And then like an hour later, it's this red Cutlass, 85 Cutlass pulling up to my mama's house on rims, bass booming, the windows shaking. And my mom was like, who is that thuggy ruggy boy pulling up to my house? And I was like, oh, he's just a boy from school. And I go out, I hop in his passenger side, I return his package. And then literally I have not gotten out of his passenger seat since. Like,
Ashley, you are lying to me. This is a fairy tale.
It was a hood fairy tale,
Yes,
if you want to call it
that.
20 years ago, I met him. We went on our first date at Borders, because Borders used to have all the hood books in a row. They had an African-American hood book section. And I remember picking up The Coldest Winter Ever. And I was like, you have to read this book. I had already read it. And I was like, you have to read it. It's so good.
You're telling your now husband, but your boyfriend back then. Hold up. You telling, Ash, we got to make this make sense. You were telling this hood street dude that he has to read this book.
So the difference between, when you think of a hood dude, you're not thinking of anybody intellectual. I knew that he was super smart just based on the conversations that we would have. So him selling drugs was a product of being in that environment. Sure. And it was because of a need, not a want. He had aspirations to go to college. He was, all-state football player, running back at one of the biggest city schools. So he had all of these dreams to go to college. We were having upper echelon conversations. It wasn't just like a cute hood dude that I liked. I wouldn't have been attracted to that. Mm-hmm. He was so smart. And we just talked about the future. We talked about what our careers would be. And he had actually started writing a book way before any of us had even had a conversation about being authors. Like he was writing a book in like 9th grade, like a John Grisham type of story. And so we would go on dates at the bookstore. Like that was our thing. He would take me to Borders.
Wow. And
I was like, you have to read this book. It's so good. And he had never read a street fiction book before. Besides like the old school ones like Donald Goines. And he was like, I don't want to read that book. Like the girl got, her lips was on it. It was like red lips on that book. He was like, that's a girl book. And I was like, I'm telling you, it's fire. And so he said no, but he bought it for me. And I think he bought like an Eric Jerome Dickey book or something.
Okay.
And when I got out his car, I swapped the books. I took the Eric Jerome Dickey book and left him with Sister Soldier's book.
When I tell you this is a movie right here. Okay, go ahead. I am visual. This is how I can tell you're an author because you're painting the picture. I'm like over here watching. I'm seeing it all happen.
You're seeing it playing in your head. And it's crazy because it was so long ago. It was literally 21, 22 years ago. But it feels like yesterday. We swapped books. And by that next morning, he had stayed up all night reading that book. I don't even think he came to school that next day. He stayed up reading Coldest Winter Ever, and he called me like, you right, this book was fire. So that's how we fell in love with reading together. Shortly after that, he moved me out of my mom's house. We were still in high school, like buying TVs and just like planning to live together. We got our first little 1-bedroom apartment. It was like 500 square feet, but it was ours, like it felt like a mansion and it was freedom to just be together all the time. And of course I got pregnant shortly after that, but unfortunately I had an ectopic pregnancy. So healing through that, it takes like 6 weeks to fully heal from that, but it's a lot of pain. And he just was seeing me in so much pain. And he was like, you know what, Ash, I bet I can write a better book than you. And I'm so competitive. Like, I'm like an asshole with my competitiveness.
Are you a Leo?
I am a Leo, baby.
Oh, I'm a Leo, so I get it.
Yes. So as soon as he said that, it was like something went off inside me. Like something snapped me out of all that depression, all of that pain. And he would wheel me up to this we didn't even have a computer desk. It was like a little nightstand. He set up the computer and I'm just going, just so competitive. And I would read what he was writing because he was still in the streets. You know, he would still leave, go to the block, come back hours later. And when he was gone, I would cheat and read what he was writing to make sure mine was better.
For sure.
But I fell in love with what he was writing. And I was like, you know what? We should just merge these stories. And we did that. And it became our very first published book, Dirty Money.
You know what?
That was the start.
That is a hood fairy tale.
It's definitely
That
hood.
is so cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. So that's your first published book together.
Yes.
Because we're going to be going here, there, all over the place. Since then, how many total books do you all have?
In the entire I call it a universe. Like in the entire Ashley and Jaquavis universe.
Yes.
We are probably at 60 plus. I haven't counted in a long time, but we're at like 60 plus novels.
Are you serious? Yeah. Oh, look, and I'm over here like dying over this one. Okay,
Yeah, you got
I got 59 more.
You got a lot
My
to go.
life, my extra time, I'm not even going to have any extra time because I'm addicted to, Okay, first of all, that is a dope story.
Thank you.
You know, I have to ask, are you guys going to have a movie about your lives?
So we have been approached many, many times about bringing our true life story to the screen. But when it's your story, it doesn't feel like a big deal. You know, like we lived it. We're still living it. So we always say no. Like we're always like, yeah, well, we don't think we're that interested.
Ashley,
No, thank you.
What?
Yeah, it's, I don't know. We've always been private though. Like it took us a long time to kind of share that bond with the world. Like we've always protected it and just let our characters and our stories have the spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
Even now, like I don't do interviews. Not a lot of them. Like you might be able to pull up some very old ones, but I try to just let my characters, you know, get their just dues and stay in the background. So he's kind of the same way. So we've declined a lot of offers from a lot of Hollywood producers who want to tell our story. We are focused on bringing those characters to the screen.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the characters.
Okay.
Because there may be people that are watching that have never read the book, so I don't want to give away too much. As an author, let's talk about the writing process, right? Because knowing some of the characters, again, we're going to continue to say these are street fiction. These are some hood books. First of all, Malta and Flame starts off like, B, why are we listening to this old? So I was like, okay, I can listen to this book.
Yeah,
like,
it's real.
It's real.
Yeah.
It's real. I love it. First of all, okay, because, you know, I've interviewed hundreds of celebrities over the years in their music process. Mm-hmm. So let's set the scene first. What do you need to be able to get into the mode of writing? You know, some people need brown liquor. Some people need, you know.
Not the brown liquor. Not the brown. Okay, so I feel, and this is just me, every author will give you a whole different poetic process of how they create. I feel like all of that is just like a scapegoat. I create anywhere and everywhere. Like if I'm at a restaurant and something pop into my head, I'm writing on the napkin.
Really?
I've been in Chuck E. Cheese with my 2-year-old son, just games blaring around me with my laptop, like, you know, just banging it out. I feel like you as a professional author, you don't have the luxury to set the scene. You might not always be inspired. The environment might not always be perfect. It might, you might not always have your candle and your wine and the mood set to write, but you still have to write. Discipline accomplished those 60 books. It wasn't really a mood. I'll write anywhere. When you love it, you write everywhere.
How many of your characters are inspired by real people? Like, can you be out and about and you see something happen and you be like, oh, I'm going to take that from there? Or are these people that are in your life? Or are they
It's a combination of both. It's a combination of all of those things. Coming from Flint, you've seen every character. You know, you've seen the wino at the liquor store. You've seen the crackhead in your family that don't nobody talk about. You know, you see the hustlers. You see all of these bottom feeders of society coming from the inner city. But that's all you see. You know, the doctors and the lawyers and the college student, a lot of us are first generation millionaires. We're first generation examples of success. So growing up, I saw the hood and I loved that shit. You know, I didn't feel like I was going without. I didn't feel like, I was living in dire circumstance. I loved everything about growing up in Flint. So that's who I wanted to write about. I wanted it to be authentic. I wanted to breathe life into this city and put it on the page for other people around the country to read. And what I found was there's a hood everywhere. Yeah. And that is a universal experience. So when they're reading about ethic, they remember the ethic in their city. And they like, oh, you're personalizing this. And I think that's what makes the book so real.
When I tell you the books are real, y'all, I'm trying to hold back because she knew I was telling her I literally lost sleep listening to this book because it is so real. And just, you're amazing at what you do. And I'm not saying that to gas.
Thank you.
Like literally every single thing that I gotta keep saying heard because I did the audiobook. Yeah.
That counts.
Yes. But the picture was so clear.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I was watching a movie listening to this book. Mm-hmm. I am invested. Like I was literally invested. My heart hurt sometimes.
I love that.
You could feel the passion and the love between the characters. And just like every word you use is so intentional. And
it is.
That is a gift.
Thank you.
How did you know you had the gift?
So if you would have asked me, like in high school, what I wanted to be, I would have said a journalist. Like I always wanted to write in some form. I never thought author. I never thought fiction. I thought, I would be like on CNN and like, welcome to, that was what I saw in my head. But God just had a different plan for me. Sometimes you go through these hard moments in life and you ask why. Like you can't figure out why these hard things keep happening to you or why your circumstance was this and you see somebody else whose circumstance is up here. I really think that all of the hardships I experienced over the years were given to me divinely so that I can put them in these fictional stories, so that I can create these characters and so that I can commune with women who relate to those experiences too. So I just think I've always been on this path to be a creative author. I would not have been able to predict it though. Like there was no intentional choice. Like, I want to be an author, but I'm a Leo. So when that first book was done, I was like, oh, this is good. This needs to be published, And my first query to a publisher was so arrogant. It was Leo. It was like some Leo shit. I was like, if you don't sign us, we're going to come back and you're going to regret it. It was like the most unprofessional letter ever, but it got us a book deal.
Wow. Okay, so you get your book deal, but how do you know, like, what was the defining moment for you and your husband where you were like, oh, this really popped off? Like, people are really reading this.
So we had two defining moments. The first moment was when we went to New York. So our books have always been really, really big on the East Coast. Back in the day, and that's crazy to even say back in the day, but in the beginning,
been writing for a long time.
I have. It was like 2005, the first book came out. And there was this huge event called the Harlem Book Fair. It doesn't go on anymore, unfortunately, but it was the place to be for Black authors in the middle of July. It was like the third weekend of July, the hottest weekend of the city. And our publisher flew us out there. And and
y'all are at the time still living in Flint?
Yes, we were still in Flint.
So going from Flint to New York, that's a big deal.
It was a whole deal. Yeah. We was in like a little DoubleTree hotel. Like, oh my God, like it just felt real big. So we pull up to this festival and there's a line wrapped around the block at this one table. And we're like, who are they here to see? And as soon as we pulled up, they were like, there's Ashley and Jaquavis. There's Ashley and Jaquavis. And it blew our mind. Like, oh, they here for us. So it was that one moment that we knew we were developing a fan base. But at that point, he was still hustling. Yeah. Like, he's selling books and dope out the truck. You know what I mean? Like, he was still in the streets. It took for us to make New York Times for us to say, oh, wait, this is not a hustle for us. This is a career. Because we were treating books like a temporary thing. That's why we have so many. We were writing like 10 a year, like just turning them over.
That's crazy. That's not even...
We thought it would end. You know, so if somebody's paying you for this creative work, you like, oh, let me do as many as I can while the getting is good.
Yeah.
But when we made New York Times, it really solidified that, no, this is something you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. And we had no idea we would even qualify for that list. Like I said, we write street fiction books.
Yeah.
But The Cartel is probably our biggest series to date. And that series just took our careers over the top. It solidified us in a way that we would have never been able to even pray for because we didn't know to pray for it.
And I don't even know if you can answer this, but what was the conversation like between you and your husband when he said, when this happens is when I will pull away from the streets? Like, how do you decide?
So when we first got the book deal, and he literally side-eyes me every time he think about this. We were in college, so we were still, we were on our plan, you know, like after I had the ectopic pregnancy, we applied to college because we didn't hear back right away. Well, we heard back right away from the publisher, but I wasn't checking that email regularly. So I didn't get it for a few months. So we had enrolled in a college. We had applied to a university in Michigan and been accepted. We went away up there. He was still in the streets to pay for college. You know, we weren't taking out loans and stuff. He was paying for my schooling. And he would keep all of his product in my dorm room just in case his got searched.
Oh, Lord Jesus. This is all so dangerous. Like, and she was like, yes, because
it was, you know, when
it seemed so normal back then, I'm sure.
It seemed like love. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
we was
down.
riding. We were riding and dying for one another. And
Ash was the down chick. What are you talking about?
Child.
Ride it out.
I was. Like, he's always been the person that I would do anything for because I knew at the end of the day, and I still know this has never been a doubt that he's going to keep me safe. Even in the most tumultuous of circumstances, he has a plan to keep me safe.
Which sounds like a character in the book, but I'm going to keep going. Go ahead.
So, you know, I got his product, you know, in my little closet, my bureau at I ain't gonna say the university, but at the university.
Well, somebody go look up in and be like, I wonder what room she was in.
Right. So I'm keeping it safe. You know, he come in and he picking off of it anytime he has to make a sale. And I got the email that we had been signed to a book deal. He was not even on campus. I called him like, you don't have to do this no more. I'm dumping it all in the toilet. He raced to my dorm room like, what is you doing? You know, this is $50,000 worth of work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't have to do this. We just got a book deal. They want to sign us. You know, when you hear sign us, you're thinking millions of dollars.
Yeah.
That first book deal was like $4,000. He was so pissed. But that was why we started writing.
Did you dub it?
Yes.
You really dubbed it?
It was flushed, girl.
Oh my
Flushed.
gosh.
So we had to make that money back. So we were like, okay, $4,000 book, let's write 10. You know, let's write 20. And that's what kind of put us on a pace to drop these books rapidly. For one, we had to make that money back. And then once we discovered that we can make that money legally, it was almost like we became addicted to that, you know, a legal hustle.
That's so good. Okay, so your first book deal is $4,000, but then at some point, weren't you all the first, I want to say, were you the first authors that Cash Money signed?
We weren't the first. Were we the first? See, this is so crazy because the whole Cash Money era.
First of all, I didn't even know that Cash Money had like authors.
They do.
That's pretty cool.
And that whole era like was 10 years ago and it doesn't even feel like it.
Yeah.
I want to say we were the first batch of authors they signed.
Okay.
So they started a publishing company in 2011, I think it was. And they picked like 5 authors to start and debut this lineup. And we were that. Like we were part of the whole press release, the press run, the tours. And Baby and Slim are great friends of ours to this day.
And so that definitely wasn't a $4,000 deal.
No.
Okay.
That was a you ain't never got to work again type of deal.
We about to write books.
Yes.
Okay.
But before they came along, we had tapped into the territory of this is a career, this can sustain us. Like I haven't worked a normal job probably in 17 years. So before Cash Money came along, we were in a place where we could do this and be comfortable and like change our lives, our kids' lives. You know, we were there.
Okay. You mentioned working a regular job. Outside of being an author, what are some of the regular jobs
that I had?
Yeah.
Okay, so
start from the very beginning. I'm talking Burger King. I need to know all that.
Okay, the first job I ever had was as a waitress. I was 14. And I just wanted to pay for stuff, you know, like my mom didn't always have it to buy me like the new Forces before Forces came back, you know, like the original ones.
Yes.
She did and I wanted to be fly, you know, like I was very much into like how I looked and presented myself to the world. So I got a job at this little soul food restaurant. They was paying me under the table. And I remember like my first table was my grandma. Like she came in there just to eat so she could tip me $100.
Oh, that's so sweet.
So that was my first job.
Shout out to Granny having $100 though. Okay.
Yeah, listen, Granny was gonna make her coin.
I'm about to say, let me find out Granny had bricks too.
So grandma, she was like she was like a number runner. You know what I mean? So like as a kid, she used to like give me all the hood numbers. Everybody would come play their numbers, and she would tuck it in my waistband and make me run them across the street to Mr. Larry.
You have had some experiences. Oh my goodness, that's so funny.
So I was always somebody's doing something crazy for somebody.
But always a down chick though. That's that Leo in you. I'm telling you.
So that was my first job. My second job was at this little festival called the Renaissance Festival. So in Michigan, I had to be maybe 15 at that time. In the summertime leading into the fall, there's this huge like medieval festival, and all the teenagers from the city will go and work there. So that was my second job. My third job was a high school counselor. An elementary school counselor. I did that all while I was in high school. I was like coming and mentoring the kids and teaching their after school programs. And I did that for years. Even after I could afford to quit that job, I just loved working with kids. Yeah. You know, and I was a lot younger then too. I wasn't a mom yet. My patience was there, you know, but I did that for a very long time. They used to call me Miss Ashley. I was like 15 and they would be like, Miss Ashley, Miss Ashley.
That's crazy.
That was probably my favorite job. And then after that, I went into leasing apartments. I was like a leasing agent at an apartment community. And then after that, I quit all of them just to write full time.
I bring that up because a lot of people, you know, we talk about the dash. Mm-hmm. Dash is that little bitty line between your birth date and your death date. It's your story. It's your journey. And a lot of times people are maybe in a position right now and they have other dreams and aspirations. And they don't see where the transition is ever going to take place. Yeah. And nothing that you just mentioned, well, outside of running numbers for Granny, tells me author, right? Yeah. But they all led up to your experiences that you shared through being a creative. Yeah. Which is so, again, I just always love for people to walk away and feel encouraged. It doesn't really matter where you start.
It doesn't. Because the place that you end up is the most unlikely of places. Like I said, I would have never put New York Times bestselling author. I remember sitting in Warner Brothers office. I'm talking like the head of Warner Brothers studio sitting right across from me, and they're listening to my creative ideas. I'm running and leading this meeting, and me and my husband are there, and we're just like talking about developing these shows. And I had imposter syndrome. I literally was like, oh, they don't know who the fuck they let up in here. You know, like it was like, we do not belong here. Yes. But when you look back at all the work that prepared you for that moment, it's kind of cathartic because it's like, no, I do belong here. You know, I put in the work to be in this very seat. And there were moments when I was discouraged. There were moments when I felt like my books weren't selling enough, or, you know, I was looking at other people's race. Like, wait, they way up there. Why I'm way back here? And once I focused in and narrowed in on what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be, I took off. And I took off without even realizing that I was winning, you know, that I was in the lead.
How did you refocus? We all deal with imposter syndrome. Because I was going to ask you that. You know, when you're sitting in front of these, what are they, publishers, these companies, all of these big wigs, they probably don't look like you.
They don't.
So they're probably white men.
They are.
And now
women.
Or women. And then now you're sitting here with these hood tails.
Oh, my God.
This is the part of the story people don't even take into consideration. And you being like, and then we going to have a car. It's going to come around the block. And they're probably looking at you like, what?
So when I first got in those rooms, I felt very like inclined to tone it down. I felt like, okay, you know, I can't write like this, or I can't say this, and I can't do that. Like, you feel like you kind of have to water it down for them a little bit.
Code switch a little bit, yeah.
A little bit, you know, you gotta, code switching is real, you know, and when you get there though, and you realize they would never know the authenticity behind you and behind your story and behind every single accomplishment, every single thing that attracted them to you for this position comes from an authentic place. Mm-hmm. And once we started to approach it like that, once I said, no, they got to take all of me, you know, like, you have to take every single word on this page. I'm not taking nothing out. I'm not editing it. I'm not making you feel comfortable to read it. You got to read it as I wrote it. Mm-hmm. And once I started to do that, it was like fandom just, it was crazy. It grew because I was already successful with the toning it down a little bit. And once I started to take the filter completely off, it was like, oh, the sky is the limit.
Was there ever a time that a company or an individual in a company asked you, can you take this part out? Can you change this? Where you felt like they were trying to make you switch up who you authentically are?
I don't think so. There was never a time when they asked me to tone it down. But there were times when they tried to change the tone of certain scripts to fit their narrative in their minds of what Black experience looked like. And I was like, that wouldn't happen in the hood though. You know, like they would edit and give feedback in a way that was almost too ghetto, you know, like almost too much. Like, no, that's a caricature of what you think the hood looks like. That's not that. You know, this girl wouldn't do that. This girl wouldn't say that, or this character wouldn't be that. Like, stop telling Black creatives how to portray Black art.
Say it
again. You know, like
it
was that. I experienced more that than them trying to tone it down. It was almost like they was trying to tone it up. They was trying to play into some type of
stereotypes.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, no, that ain't how that go.
Yeah. Okay, I have to ask you, when it comes to your characters, are you one of the characters in your books?
Oh my God, I'm probably all the damn characters in the book.
That's a true Leo.
I am probably all of them. I have moments of being Mia Moore from the Cartel series. She is like this hot-headed hit woman, but not in a way that's like corny, you know, with the leather and the guns. Like, she is just like a hitter. Like, she's in the streets, and people know if I need something cleaned up, I need to hit her. Yeah. In my deepest, darkest reality of my mind, I'm that gangster. I ain't never hurt nobody, but I swear I would.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But Alani is probably my most relatable character. You haven't gotten to her yet, but
I'm excited.
She's a character in Ethics series that I evolved into over time. So when I wrote Moth to a Flame when I was 20, how old was I? Maybe like 21? 22?
I so need to play catch up.
Yeah,
Jeez,
so
okay.
I was very young when I was writing Raven, and you can tell, you know, in the writing and the things that she's interested in. I wrote Alani. I started writing about Alani when I was 34, maybe. So her character is a lot more grounded. She isn't as perfect, and, you know, like, a lot of my characters are picture perfect. You know, they all fine, they all this, they all that. Alani is like a human Black woman. She's a mess sometimes. She's emotional. Her anxiety eat her up. But she is the center of this universe. She's the heart of this series, and I probably relate to her the most.
Writing with your husband and then living with your husband, how difficult can that be? Because it's not easy to work with the person that you lay with. I mean, let's be clear. Like, especially if you don't agree on something.
Oh, we disagree all the time.
Yeah, like, how do you all make this work? Like, this is a, like, that's why I always say this is a great story in itself.
Yeah. So I think he trained me to be able to work with anybody, because we had to learn how to, respect each other's creative differences, and be open to sharing. When you're an author, that's like your baby, you know, and we had to create babies together over and over again. But we got to choose what we put in them. So I had to trust his skill and his pen enough to not want to take out what he wants to add in. You know, it's like baking a cake. Like, we need a little bit of salt. Like, we don't need no salt. Or like spaghetti. Some people put sugar in it, some people don't, you know?
Oh, and Lord, yes. I just was like, oh, Lord, spaghetti.
Yeah, I had to trust that. Like, that's okay, true. Well, trust his recipe for this book.
But was there ever a time that
every time, every single time. So we have this rule when we're writing, we have blow up fights about these characters.
Yeah.
And we know if we have not fought through the whole book, that the book is not complete. We have to have one, I'm talking about a bad fight. Like, yeah, nah, I ain't writing with you no more. You know, like we have to have that fight in every single project before we conclude the story, or we know we haven't gotten it yet.
So when there's a disagreement, how do you finally come to a happy medium and decide how you're going to move forward?
Well, it kind of just like, it kind of resolves itself because we know that if we're both feeling so strongly in opposite directions, that the answer is somewhere in the middle of that. Like we've done this enough times to know that. Like but we still like we're stubborn. So I'm like dying. I'm sticking my flag in this soil and I'm dying right there.
Yeah.
And he's the same way. So the arguments, baby, are intense.
Yeah.
And then when we tired of it and like we want to talk about something else but we mad at each other, you know, then we meet in the middle like, okay, well, what about this? You know, and it just he is the spark to my creative dynamite. Like without him, none of these books would exist. Like he just breathes life into me and into my pen. And I walk into every room with him on my back. Like he's the reason why I'm not afraid to sit in front of anybody.
If a man don't say that about me in his life, then I don't need the man. I need to be the spark to the flame.
He's the spark.
That was so beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. I am so happy for you. I'm so excited for you.
Thank you.
To know where you came from. Again, sometimes when we don't know where people have come from, you know, it's hard for us to respect the hustle on the level that we should.
Yeah.
Because you have fans, but now you're about to have so many more that have never read because now they've honestly fallen in love with you as a person.
Yeah.
Which I think is so beautiful because, yes, you do have all these characters and you do play the back, but you have such a beautiful spirit. Every time I've been around you.
Thank you, Jade.
And I really wanted people to kind of get a glimpse of who you are.
Oh, Lord.
You know, which is, I think is just...
I ain't for everybody, but for the people I'm for.
Yeah, I mean, that's everybody, right? So I got to ask you about your husband. So what is he doing now? Is he directing?
He is directing. He is like full-fledged into this movie thing. He just released a film called Everything is Both with Jason Mitchell and Barton Fitzpatrick from The Chi. They were on the first season of The Chi. He's full-fledged into the next one. He's still writing too, but his passion now has shifted. It's grown. So in books, there's like a ceiling that you hit. And he is very much so the type of person that needs a new challenge. You know, he doesn't want to continue to just be comfortable in the greatness that he's attained. So he matriculated to films almost instantly. And he's doing extremely well at them. He has like, you know, BT on the line and Lionsgate on the line. So, but he's also still that hustler. So he like, what's the benefit of me signing over there? You know, like.
But that is what works.
Yeah.
Having that grit.
Yeah.
That's what works. That's what pushes him to the next level. He ain't gonna just take nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you don't need the money, it's hard for money to be the motivating factor in your decisions. So he is at a place where he can creatively do whatever he wants. And that's a beautiful place to be.
We hear New York Times bestseller all the time. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Like, what makes an author a New York Times bestseller? What do you have to do to become that?
So you really just have to create your best art. New York Times is a measurement system that basically solidifies an author's career. You have to sell, and this is the thing, nobody knows the formula to what they look for. So you can't like manipulate the numbers. You can't like, you know, make sure that your project hits it. I know you have to have a significant number of sales. Of course, sales drives everything, but nobody knows what that threshold is. You also have to be published by, you know, a certain company. You have to sell the books through certain specific stores and specific channels to even qualify. And I'm sure there are a lot of other hidden agendas that nobody will ever know because I'm also a literary agent. So some of my clients have sold tens of thousands of books in like a week and didn't hit the list. So that makes you scratch your head and say, okay, well, what are they looking for? Because this book should have definitely made it. But they're just, those editors have very specific qualifications that they look for that's like top secret.
How do you have time to be a literary agent? And as you're helping other people, does that not like, and maybe you're over here writing, like how do you separate the two? How do you compartmentalize?
I'm the type of person that I like to, I'm also a challenge type of girl. Like I like to know every single aspect of the business that I'm in. And for a long time, Jaquavis and I had a big hand in negotiating our deals behind the scene. We have an amazing literary agent, but he's become a friend over the years. So it would kind of be like conversational instead of him directing us. We're kind of like pulling the strings of our own career. And it got to a certain point where I was the only Black face in these rooms. I was the only Black author. Kind of like, you know, that hip hop beef you see between the female rappers. The industry tell you there can only be one. You know, there's one successful one. But when you're the only successful one at the top, or one of very few, is lonely up there. You know, you looking around like, okay, all these authors are white.
Yeah.
You know, all of these books on the shelves are white.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be in a position to put writers of color on. You know, I wanted to give them a seat at the table. Like, nah, there's more of me. You know, Ashley Antoinette fans, Ash Army, there are more stories out here than just mine, because I can't write a book for you to read 365 days of the year. I can give you a few a year.
Yeah.
You know, and then you're going to be like hounding me for the next one.
Yeah.
But there are so many other talented scribes out there. It's like, why are you only looking to me? That's because we're trained to, there can only be one.
Yeah.
I know so many. So it was like, yeah, it's your responsibility. You've mastered this writing thing. I can write books in my sleep. I can literally just put a puzzle together. Like, okay, I'm gonna write about this, and this, and put it out, and the fans will love it.
Yeah.
That's not a challenge.
Yeah.
So my challenge now is to find voices who will lead after me, you know, who can come through the door that I kicked open after me. I don't want to close the door behind me. I want them to walk through it too. And I want them to have an easier path than I did.
Are your clients, or I guess they would be your clients, are your clients street fiction writers?
I don't have any street fiction writers, not yet. So with that being said, you got to be a hell of a street fiction writer for me to even accept you as a client.
I would not even hand you. Absolutely not.
You have to be. I've had some submissions, but a lot of times street fiction writers are street fiction fans first. So it's very easy for someone to emulate what you've done or what they've seen the culture do. And I'm looking for that next street writer that's going to push the culture forward. Like, put something on my desk that I haven't read or that I haven't created. You know, there are some big pivotal names in street fiction that everybody knows, you know, and if I read it and it sounds like something I've read before, I'm like, okay, you're talented. The talent is there, but the authenticity isn't there. What's your experience? Put your experience on the page.
That's good.
And I haven't found that yet.
That's good. Yeah. Ooh, challenge. Somebody out there, challenge. Somebody gonna get to it. I love that. I appreciate you for taking your time today.
Of course.
I could talk to you for like 2 more hours because I have like 1,000 more questions, but for the sake of time, what do you have coming up next? What's next for you?
Oh, God. I am in the middle of a series right now, the Butterfly series. Butterfly 5 is what I'm working on. AspireCon is a women's conference that I do annually. We're planning the next one. I have no idea where it will be or when, but we are planning, hoping for next year, maybe the year after that.
And for those that don't know what AspireCon is, it's when this whole Ash Army gets together.
Yes.
Because I actually attended one, and this is before I ever read the book. And I was like, I got to get into this because it is a ton of fun.
It is.
I mean, a ton of fun. And people are married to these characters, like you say.
We have Ash Army is just a community of beautiful women. Like, they support me. They support one another. And it became so overwhelming because I like to interact with my readers. Like, it doesn't even really feel right calling them fans because they're like a tribe for me.
Yeah.
Like, they would just be in my inbox just asking different questions. And I was like, you know what? Let's get all y'all together in one room and just handle this, you know? And I did it the first year and it was super successful, super fun. But I wanted it to be everything that I hadn't seen in a conference. So we did the book stuff. We had book discussions, but I also invited a mental health therapist there. We turned up, of course, because, Black women, we want to turn up and, yell A with our friends, with our bottles in the air.
Yes.
We did that. We learned about business and marketing, and I invited other influencers to speak. And when I first did it, people didn't really understand. They thought it was just like a book signing, and they were like, who she thinks she is? Just having her fans come out to praise her, but I didn't even speak. I haven't spoken at any of them. It's about them. It's about me giving them something back. And it's just grown from there. They are everyday women with extraordinary gifts who haven't tapped into that excellence yet.
That's so good.
Yeah.
The way that you're empowering other people is amazing. And using your platforms to do so, which is
Thank you.
Why you keep being blessed, Ashley. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I said that was my last question, but I lied. Because you just made me think I do have to ask you this.
Okay.
Has there been a character or a storyline that you've told in your books that you almost thought you were going to lose your tribe or your fan base because people got mad at you, because people got... because trust, people get so invested.
They do.
It can't be all good. They ain't loving you the whole time.
No,
Yeah.
I have whole hate groups too. So
No,
I have whole hate groups too. So the same people who love you will hate you one day too.
But they're still in the Ash Army, but
They
hate
are.
you.
They just don't like me sometimes. It depends on what I do to their favorite character.
Oh my gosh.
The Messiah Wives. Shout out to the Messiah Wives. They are the most aggressive group of women I have ever met. They stand so tall behind this fiction character that I created in Ethics series. His name is Messiah. And they just, it don't matter what he do. He could throw a dog out the window and they but he had a reason. And they are just standing tall behind him. So depending on what I do to him and the decisions that he makes on the page, they love me a lot of times. They hate me a lot of times too. I think Ethic 2 was the book that I was a little bit afraid to put out though, because I was writing it and it didn't feel good to me. It was a book that hurt to write. My chest was tight, my anxiety was high. I cried. I was writing it in the dark. So it was like a stage of depression, and it was all bleeding out onto the page because of what the characters were going through. And when I finished it, I was like, okay, I knew I still had story to go. I knew the series wasn't over, but in my mind, I was like, you have to prepare yourself for bad reviews because they're not going to like this one. And surprisingly, the authenticity of that pain, it was all 5 stars.
Wow.
Yeah, thousands of 5 stars on Amazon. So I was like, oh, they trust me to bring them out of this. You know what I mean?
And I know you know this, but while you're talking, I'm thinking to myself how many little Black girls are looking at you and saying, wow, I can actually do what she does and be an author. And the reason why I say that is because representation is so important.
It is.
And I think that a lot of times, we go towards sports, entrepreneurship, that type of stuff. But when it comes to being a creative, something in the arts, something with journalism, it may be something that our parents don't necessarily understand. And so it's hard to encourage that. Or it seems, like you said, like a side hustle.
Yeah.
And so it just seems more hobbyish. And now they're looking at you and saying, this woman has literally made millions of dollars. Her and her husband have made millions of dollars just telling the story she's wanted to tell. And when I say just, I don't mean that lightly, but literally being okay to just being in that room and being that little boy or that little girl that just likes to put thoughts on paper. Yeah. That is so important for them to see you.
I think that, and I think about that a lot because, like I said, I didn't know an author growing up. Authors were white people to me growing up. I didn't even know that was an option for me. And I think just being authentic to what you love to do, you can profit off of anything. You can profit selling rubber bands. If you the number one rubber band seller, you gonna be rich. If you the number one janitorial service, you gonna be rich. I think it's about tapping into what you love and becoming the best at it. That 10,000 hours of practice thing is real. I don't want to paint a picture that I became successful overnight because, like I said, I was making $4,000 a book at first. That ain't rich. That takes some work. It takes love to continue to write for such little pay. But that love translated on the page, and eventually the profit caught up to the passion. I think if you just
the profit caught up to the passion.
Yeah, you have to stop just falling in lanes where you don't fit or trying to put yourself in a box that isn't meant for you. Everybody ain't an athlete. Everybody isn't an Instagram model. We live in very visual times where, everybody want to start a YouTube channel or this or that. No, tap into what you love and what feels authentic to you and then become the very best. I mean, the very best. You want to walk into every room, even if you're not getting paid yet, I am the best at this. So you're going to pay me one day. I was that confident when I sent out that first email. I knew when I read it, oh, this is the shit. I am that girl in this lane. And I maxed that out. I went 100 miles per hour and I didn't even plan for anything else. It was I'm doing this or nothing.
And now here we are 60 books later.
Yeah.
God, I have 59 more books. I just thought, where am I going to find the time? But I have to read.
They're all on Audible, so you will be able to listen as you go through life.
Okay. But still, even with Audible, you be wanting to stop down because you don't want any distractions.
You do, yeah.
It's hard to even drive and listen because you're like, I really need to I need to focus. Yes. Okay. So I started with Moth to a Flame. Mm-hmm. If somebody's never read your books, where would you say that they need to start?
Moth to a Flame is a good place to start if you want an Ashley Antoinette experience. But I cannot and I will not ever discount The Cartel. The Cartel is the series that's the reason why I'm sitting here. Without Cartel, there would not have been an Ashley and Jaquavis. There would not have been a Cash Money, a Warner Brothers. That series is, it's literally a classic in street fiction.
So I can go from Moth to a Flame. I can start with Cartel now?
You can, yeah, because it's two completely different series. They aren't related. One, Cartel is straight gritty. That is the paid in full on the page. That's the hood fiction. Moth to a Flame that's street fiction too, but where I take it, I was older when I continued the series. I didn't write Ethic, which is the spinoff from Moth to a Flame, until I was in my 30s. So a whole decade passed before I tapped into those characters again. So they're much more mature. I would call that women's fiction.
Yes. Yeah. Now, I will say this. If you are listening, don't have your kids in the car.
Please don't.
Do not. This is not kid fiction. Okay, this is street fiction. This is for adults only. All right, so how can everybody follow you, get in contact with you, keep up with what you and Jaquavius have going on?
Yes, so my website is asharmy.com. I am at Ashley Antoinette on Instagram. I also co-own and I co-founded Bougie Hippie with my friend Tiff. My husband is at Real Jaquavis on Instagram. So I'm literally everywhere. I'm responding myself to comments and DMs as much as I can. So you can catch me anywhere online.
Okay, good. And I am in the Ash Army. It's official, girl. I am hooked. I'm so
welcome.
Good. Yeah,
We're so happy to have you.
I may be late to the party, but I'm in the party.
Listen, I don't know about you and Ethic though. We're gonna have a conversation about that.
Because I've been single for a long time.
It's a lot of Ethic wives out there.
Yes. But I'm like, oh my God, I may have to stay single because I'm married to this man in this book.
He definitely sets a standard that makes it hard on real men.
Okay. That's why you got to go listen to the book, read the book. Make sure you support. Go follow her. AshArmy.com?
AshArmy.com. The books are available everywhere, though. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Walmart, Target. You can get them anywhere.
Yeah. And Ashley Antoinette on Instagram.
Yes.
Okay. Y'all go follow. Y'all go support. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for the support. Make sure you subscribe to the Dash Podcast YouTube channel. Also, we're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. And feel free to share with some family and friends. Thanks, guys.